Music theory. I feel like it's very interesting, and while I have an understanding of some of it from piano classes and such, I don't think I've ever really gone through a proper music theory course before. And while this book probably won't give me all of the answers to the life, universe, and everything, it's called The Essentials of Music Theory. It's gotta have some helpful information, so I'm gonna go through this book, say everything I learned from it, and hopefully we have a video that has the essentials of music theory. I'll also link this book because I am primarily getting my information from here. So, let's get into this. Unit 1, the basics. And I do mean the basics. The first lesson is called the staff, the notes, and the pitches. And you wouldn't believe what it goes over. Music notes are C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Why did I put C first? Well, I kinda just said it because, on a piano, the C note is in the middle, and we go from there outwards. Though I guess you could start with A if you wanted and just go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The following two lessons are about the iconic treble clef and bass clef. If you're unfamiliar with these two, these are the most common clefs in music, for our purposes here today. Honestly, I really did not know that the treble clef and bass clef were just originally an overzealous G and F, but they wouldn't be complete without the grand staff, which is taught right after this, and then adds on ledger lines to help better explain the connection between the two staffs, and then places beyond their light. After these lessons, it ends with a test, which half of which I do not have access to, because I didn't get a CD with this book. The other half was pretty good though. The quiz I took ended with a little line about naming individual notes to spell a sentence. D-A-B. Overall, I'd say Unit 1 is like when you restart something and it feels infinitely more tedious because you generally understand the concepts shared, but not rushing through it was nice. I learned some fun facts. Yeah, it was kind of boring though, but if you're completely unfamiliar with music, there's a reason they start with this. Anyway, on to Unit 2. Unit 2. If Unit 1 was the introduction for Unit 2, Unit 2 was the introduction for Unit 3. Which, what do you know? Knowledge compounds and builds off of itself. But this one starts with introducing note values. A whole note, a half note, and a quarter note, with stems going in whatever direction takes up the whole staff. Now, this makes you wonder, what are we comparing the length of a note to? Huh? Oh shit, it's time signature in the house! But only 4/4 right now. I'll be honest, this one was a little hard to wrap my head around, mainly the bottom number, but I think I get it now. So let me explain. The bottom number is the value of a beat, in this case, a quarter note. Also, something I learned, they have a different name if you're British. Whole note is a semi-breve. I'm probably saying this wrong. I would say sorry, but I don't know how to say that in British, apparently. I'm sorry. Half note is minim. Quarter note is crochet, crotchet, and the eighth note is a quaver. And then the numerator represents how many beats will make up a whole bar. A bar helps make the music easier to read and divides it by what time signatures the numerator says. This unit then goes into whole rests, half rests, and quarter rests, which sound like this. And that's Unit 2. Okay, I'll say it. The denominator thing was way more confusing than I originally said. I honestly don't think I understood it. I don't know, it just didn't click in my brain. The different terms did not help it either. But I've escaped denominator hell for now. Now, to be fair, we were exclusively at 4/4 for this unit, so maybe they'll explain this whole numerator-denominator thing just a wee bit better a little later on. This unit was mainly an introduction to time and simple note fractions. Anywho, let us move towards Unit 3. Remember time signatures? Well, they're back in Unit 3 as 2/4. And introducing 3/4, the dashing bastard. And then introducing the brand new dotted half note. Great, this guy thinks he's special because he gets an extra beat just because he's got a dot. Well, I searched it up and guess what? This dot is basically half version of whatever note it represents. Half note is 2 plus 1, so a whole note would be 4 plus 2, and a quarter note would be 1 plus a half, at least for 4/4. Neat. I'd also like to say, they tricked me into doing simple algebra with the notes. Which I was fine with. I was fine with that. I'm really, really good at algebra, you guys. Okay, The next lesson, ties and slurs? Okay, sure. Ties are basically making a super long note with two notes of the same pitches. Oh, that's why they had me do this simple algebra. Music theory foreshadowing goes crazy. Slurs are what they sound like. Really, really mean words. Okay, basically when notes are slurred, it means there should be no silence in between them. So instead of it's this is also known as legato. And this unit was basically when I realized, oh, I don't know as much as I thought I did. And that Dunning-Kruger effect, well, my ego did start crashing down a little bit. And boom, that's Unit 3. Unit 4 starts with repeat signs, first endings, and second endings. Okay, so if you see the repeat symbol, it's a double bar with 2 dots. With the 2 dots to the left and nothing else, you repeat from the very beginning. If there's a repeat symbol with the 2 dots to the right, ignore it until you find the one with the dots to the left and then go back to the one with the dots on the right. Simple. First and second endings are like beating a game and then doing New Game Plus and getting the secret true final boss. You repeat from the first ending, but once you get back, skip it and go to the second one. I know this is to help pieces be less lengthy page-wise, and I totally get it, but it's definitely something I can see myself forgetting if I don't keep it in mind. Next up is arguably the most iconic note of all time. It's the 8th note. This note is like the music note, and its premise is, well, I mean, it's a half of a quarter note, which, like, makes sense. When you pair these bad boys together, though, you get a beam on top of the notes, or below them, depending on the situation. Oh, and since this unit is about eighths, let's introduce the scariest of them all. Eighth rest. I've noticed they all clarify it's in 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4. I wonder what that could mean. The next lesson was about dotted quarter notes, which makes me feel like I probably didn't need to do that preliminary research a little earlier on. Oh well, I learned that a dotted quarter note is typically followed with an 8th note. You know, to make a whole quarter out of half a quarter. Okay, the numbers are getting a little small and big at the same time. As long as they don't get any smaller, I think we'll be okay. This unit ends with a quiz, and now they have me rewriting Minuet. Oh joy. I'll be honest, I'm getting a little more terrified the farther we go along here, but let's keep on pushing forward. Unit 5. Alright, okay, yep. Dynamic signs. These indicate the volume, or how soft or how loud the music should be played. In Italian. And English, I guess, but I've been speaking that this whole time. So there's piano, which means soft. Forte, which means loud. Mezzo piano, which means moderately soft. Mezzo forte, which means moderately loud. Pianismo is very soft, and fortissimo is very loud. But that's not all. If a song changes to get gradually louder, it's got this sign called a crescendo. But if we're getting softer with the music, then we go diminuendo or decrescendo. This lesson ends with a short story that asks me to describe the actions of the characters being loud or quiet using these new terms. It was sure a lesson. The next lesson is about tempo marks, which is the speed at which the music is to be played. We've got largo, adagio, andante, moderato, allegro, and vivas. I don't know this last one.
Vivace.
And then, to explain gradual changes, there's a retardando for slower and accelerando for faster. Oof, that is a lot of Italian terms for music. We can thank the Catholic Church for that, but that's conversation for another day. Next up is articulation. These are special symbols used for notes that you have to articulate in whatever way they say. Here's what was introduced at this part. And now we moved on to the more advanced repeats. DC, DS, coda, and fine. DC stands for da capo, which means to repeat from the beginning. Segno beats to repeat from this sign. Fine is the end. Coda is an additional ending. These are all used in various ways to make music less lengthy, from playing to fine to playing to the end and going back to the symbol and then to fine, and then playing the secret coda ending. Oof. That was a lot of Italian. A lot of these words are very useful in indicating how a piece is to be played from speed to tone. This unit had a lot of little details that are important for giving more of a human feeling to a piece. And a lot of these terms I feel like I'll definitely have to come back to, because I don't know if I can remember all of this at once. But now the information is here, and by writing it and saying it, it'll probably stick out a little better too. Unit 6. Suddenly, we dropped the Italian, and now we are learning about flats and sharps. Basically, if your note is natural and you play the key directly to the left of it, it's flat. And with sharps, it's whatever key is to the right. And then there's neutrals, which is a return to the regular note. But why would you need something like that? Well, there's this thing called accidentals, which is basically a rule that states any note that has a sharp or flat affects all of the other same notes of sharp or flat in the same bar. So you can get a neutral to change that, or just wait for the next bar, then it's reset, unless a note is tied across bars. The other thing taught in this unit was whole steps and half steps, which are pretty simple. A half step is a jump to the key right next to the other, and a whole step is a jump to the key 2 notes from the original. This information will be handy later. Trust me. There's also enharmonic notes, which are when the same note has 2 different names: C sharp, D flat, D sharp, E flat, and so on and so forth. This unit ends with a crossword! Actually, this crossword makes a lot of sense. Very fun, highly recommend. Quick, what's 2 across? The hint is smoothly connected. Ah, thank you. Legato was correct. Sorry, was that too Dora the Explorer coded for you? Oh, well, she is one of my biggest inspirations, so I'll need you to deal with it, alright? Anyway, that's the end of Unit 6. Unit 7, the beginning of Act 2. The tension is rising, and so is the overwhelming nature of all this theory. This unit starts with teaching us about tetrachords and major scales. Tetra equals 4. A tetrachord is 4 notes going in a pattern of a whole step, half step. So a major scale, it has 8 notes, with the steps going whole, half, whole, half. Or 2 tetrachords with a whole step connecting them. The notes in a scale are referred to as degrees. This lesson starts with only C major, C tetrachord, G tetrachord. But in the following lesson, titled The Sharp Scales, we get introduced to G major, G tetrachord, and D tetrachord. And D major, D tetrachord, and A tetrachord. These ones are called sharp scales because they have sharp notes in them. On this lesson page, there was a small text that said important, and it contained a fact that said, starting with the C major scale, the second tetrachord is always the first tetrachord of the following sharp scale. This overlapping pattern continues throughout all major scales. This is important, trust me. The next lesson is about flat scales, F and B flat major. F major, F tetrachord, C tetrachord, if you can see, connects to the C major scale. So that's the scale that goes before C major. And B flat tetrachord, F tetrachord, connects to F major. Similarly to the connections between tetrachords, starting with the C major scale, the 4th scale degree is always the 1st scale degree of the following flat scale. And this pattern continues all the way through all major flat scales. Whew. Are you still keeping up? Don't worry, the next lesson is about making the music a little easier to read. Key signatures. So, a key signature is used so you don't have to keep writing the sharp or flat sign next to every note. If you put a sharp next to the respective letter on the bar next to the treble or bass clef, any note that is played that matches that letter, for example an F, will be an F sharp unless a natural symbol is used. This book says sharps written in the key signature appear in a specific order, so it's probably important to keep that in mind. Here's some useful information. If you go up half a step from the last sharp on the key signature, you can figure out what the major key is. F sharp, G major, C sharp, D major. This is a big one because now when I look at sheet music I can better understand it. I'm not done yet though. There's also flat keys. They work similarly to sharps. You put them right next to the clef to indicate the notes that will be played flat. Also similarly, flats written in the key signature will also be in a specific order. And also, it has an important fact which says to figure out the name of a major key from the key signature, remember that one flat is the key of F. For 2 or more flats, the next to last flat is the name of the key. As an example, a key signature of B flat and E flat would be the key of B flat major. Bada boom. Okay, I'm getting dizzy with all of this information right now, but we will continue to push forward. It's a lot of information you'll need to keep reinforcing in your head, but I believe we can do it. This unit ended with another quiz where they asked me to write some scales and match some notes. This unit was laying a foundation for scales and chords. This information can seem overwhelming, but a lot of it is just small tips that'll help you out in tricky situations. So keep those important facts in mind as we move on to Unit 8. Okay, Unit 8. This one starts with an information dump of the remaining major scales and their key signatures. How nice. They give some helpful tips with the order of the sharps and flats, like the acronym for the order of sharps in the key signature. Fat cats go down alleys eating bread? Or the saying for flats, bead plus GCF? Okay, they really did not even try with that one. I got a better one. Be excellent, and don't gatekeep correct flats. I'll be honest, I don't know how you remember these acronyms. There are 15 scales, but only 12 of them are unique. Enharmonic scales, which function the same to enharmonic notes. You know, C sharp is the same as D flat, and so on and so forth. You're really going to want to make sure you understand what notes are in the bass and treble clef. I know I just dissed acronyms, but for some reason I've always remembered face and every good boy deserves fudge for treble, and all cows eat grass, and good boys deserve fudge always for bass. The next lesson is about the chromatic scale, which is just every single note. So, exclusively half steps up the entire piano. There's 12 tones for each key until you get back to the one you started on. Just different. Like up an octave. There's not much more to this one, so let's move on to intervals. Buckle up because this one may be a doozy. Doozy. That was a funny word. Anyway, okay, intervals. An interval is the distance in pitch between two notes. These intervals are named by a number, with the beginning being 1, and the name of the second one being the name of the distance between the one. So it could be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Not 8 or 1 again though, as they've got special names for this situation. When you're on the same note, also known as 1 again, it's referred to as a unison or prime interval. If you jump up 8, you jump a whole octave. Octave, like 8. Oh, honestly, I do not know why I never realized that an octave referred to a jump of an interval of 8. Or maybe I did and I forgot. I don't know. Point being, I relearned something new today. Intervals also come in two different types. Melodic intervals, when they are played at different times, and harmonic intervals, when they are played at the same time. They also make a point of talking about even-numbered intervals and odd-numbered intervals, and how the jump is either from line to space, space to line, even, or line to line, space to space, odd. This is probably to make it easier to make them on the fly. Now, the next part in this unit is a big deal. The circle of fifths. It shows the relationship between every single key by adding flats and sharps. I'm gonna run through this really fast as it's information we've already talked about. You add more sharps as you go clockwise and flats counterclockwise, with the keys having the same order as we saw before. Sharp, F, C, G, D, A, E, B, flat, B, E, A, D, G, C, F. The rule of tetrachords applies here as you ascend and descend. At this point, a lot of the information being stated here is a lot of methods to get to certain keys and whatnot, but what do we do with these keys and this information? Well, that's when we move on to Unit 9. Alright, remember intervals from like 30 seconds ago? Well, let's talk about them some more. Perfect intervals are the intervals between the keynote of a major scale and the unison, fourth, fifth, or octave of that scale. Why they are called perfect? Well, according to this website, apparently, perfect intervals ring in a way that other intervals do not. A guy named Pythagoras was the first person from the West to explore this interesting observation. He is responsible for incorporating it into our current musical language and practice. So we can thank Pythagoras for this so-called perfect intervals. There's also major intervals, which are between the keynote of a major scale and the second, third, sixth, or seventh. Both of these intervals fall under the category of diatonic intervals, which is when the keynote and the upper note of the interval are from the same scale. All diatonic intervals in the major scale are perfect or major. Perfect 1, major 2, major 3, perfect 4, perfect 5, major 6, major 7, perfect 8. Now, if we take a major interval and decrease the second note by half a step, we get a minor interval. Major intervals can be turned into minor intervals. We are not done with intervals though. Introducing the augmented intervals, which happens when you increase either a major or perfect interval's second note by half a step. There's also diminished intervals, which are when you make a perfect or minor interval smaller by a half step, except for a perfect unison, because it would inadvertently increase its size. Whenever the keynote and the upper note of the interval aren't from the same scale, it's called the chromatic interval. The final lesson in Unit 9 was about solfege and transposition. Solfege is when you give a syllable to each note. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You can move this do around depending what key you're in, and they even write a little name for it here. Movable do. How cute. Transposition is when you take a melody and move it into another key. This makes it easier to sing or to play on a different instrument. The easiest way to transpose is by interval, and that's Unit 9. This one made more sense to me, as there's a lot of stuff to remember, but I feel as if it's not too difficult to remember that half a step above a major is an augmented interval. With solfege, it also helps with identifying different intervals. Again, there is just a lot of information that I'll need to come back to. This information probably won't stick at the exact same time, but that's Unit 9, everybody. Unit 10. You might be wondering why this unit has that subtitle. Well, remember 8th notes? This is them now. 16th notes. Oh my lord, they have 2 flags on this stem? This is insanity. It's counted like 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, got double beams and can also be combined with 8 notes. And you can't have a 16th note without a 16th rest. The 16th rest could be put in a modern art piece called the Grind Set Mindset. You know, because that's how much rest they get. Yeah, I don't know, I got nothing else for this 16th rest. 8th note? What's that? You? No, come on. No, you didn't. No, you didn't really. Oh my god. 8th note, you didn't have to conform. You were perfectly fine the way you were without another half of yourself. But I guess here we are. Dotted 8th note. 3/4 of a beat. Maybe it sounds absurd, but it's very practical. Next up, common time and cut time. Common time is the time signature of 4/4, but it can also be written as C. Sephiroth, wait. No, not the cut time. Or, a la breve, also known as 2/2, when a half note receives 1 beat per measure. This makes all of the notes half worth as much. And that's Unit 10, one of the shorter ones for sure, but it ended with signs of what's to come. Unit 11 starts with introducing the 3/8 and 6/8 time signatures. Okay, so in this time signature, an 8th note is worth 1 beat. Here's some examples. This book then goes on to tell us about 3/8 and 6/8 at fast tempos, where now instead of an 8th being worth 1 beat, it's worth 1/3. My brain kinda hurts with this one, so I'ma move on. Next up is 8th note triplets. Basically, when you get 3 above or below the notes, it's a triplet. A triplet is 3 notes played in the time of 2 notes of the same value. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. This one is a little tricky at first to wrap your head around, but once it clicks, it's not too complex. Pickup notes. This is basically musical foreshadowing. Or like starting a sentence, and basically some pieces have an incomplete measure they'll finish later on, and finishing it later. Syncopation, when the accent of the music is on the weak beat rather than the strong one. Alright, there's Unit 11. Some tricky timing teachings taught today. 2 tempo time signatures, tones. 2, the value of a whole beat based on different beats. It's like math. No, it really is just math. That sounds good. Like, literally, it's music, it sounds, okay, I'm moving on. It's crazy how much of this stuff builds off itself. I mean, it makes sense. The knowledge is simultaneously expounding outwards and upwards, and while it has been tough wrapping my head around all this, I think I'm still holding on. So, let's go to Unit 12. Triads is how we start. And they're a big one. So when you put 3 or more notes together at once, the combo makes a chord. When you have a chord with the root note, 3rd, and a 5th, you get a triad. Each triad also has a name. These names are based around the root note. You can build them out on any note, but this lesson only focuses on the C major scale, so here's some examples there. This book says that the most important triads are built on the 1st, 4th, and 5th degrees of a major scale. They're called primary triads, or primary chords. These are important because together they contain every single tone in the major scale. These triads are also referred to as major triads because they've got the root, a major 3rd, and a perfect 5th. Remember intervals? Remember how we've been calling scale degrees by numbers? Well, they got names, apparently. The first scale degree goes by tonic, because it is the lowest and highest tone of a scale. The second goes by supertonic, because it's right above. The third goes by mediant, because it is midway above the tonic and below the dominant. The fourth goes by subdominant. It is called this because it is the same distance below the tonic as the dominant is above. The fifth is called the dominant, because it is a fifth above the tonic. The sixth tone is known as submediant, because it is midway between below the tonic and above the dominant. The seventh is called the leading tone, or sometimes the subtonic. It is called this because it often leads to the tonic. And that brings us to V7, the dominant 7th chord, which is known as the replacement for the dominant/5th triad. It is not a triad though, because it's got 4th notes, but we sometimes take the 5th out of V7, so then we have 1, 4, and V7. I have a feeling we're just getting started with these triads, and this book does this thing where it'll half introduce a concept, usually just the major part, and you kinda just have to trust the process and keep that knowledge in mind. With that said, we've got 6 units left. Imagine how funny it would be if we rearranged the root note to be at the top rather than the bottom. That is what we call a first inversion. And if these notes of a chord are spaced within an octave, they're referred to as closed position. If they're spaced larger, it's an open position. Oh, but it doesn't end there. We can take any first inversion and get this. We can invert it again by moving the lowest note to the top. And then if you do it again with the new bottom note, we're back at root position. Okay then, the V7 chord can also be inverted, but this time it has 3 inversions because it's got 4 notes. This brings us to figured bass, which, from a quick overview of the page, it looks like it's something that isn't used as often, and from what I can gather online, it really isn't used that much, mainly only in classical pieces in schools to teach this sort of thing. But we're learning it, so figured bass is a way to indicate what inversion of a chord you're going to use. It originally looked like this. The top number indicates the distance between the bass, lowest note, and the top note. The bottom number was the distance between the bass note and the middle note. Eventually, this was just shortened to I6, just dropping the 3 entirely. The V7 chords do a similar thing to this, but with 4 positions. Again, this was shortened to only include the distance to the top from the bass. Okay, here's a big one. Major chord progressions. Basically, when you start wanting to do multiple chords in succession, you get a chord progression. For this lesson, they keep us on major, having us use 1, 4, and 5, because they've got all of the notes of the major scale, remember that? However, most of the time, they use V7 instead of 5. It also mentions that if you're playing 4 or 5, or V7 in root position, it can sound choppy, so they typically move the 4 chord to the second inversion, and V7/5 to the first. When they do these inversions, they also keep it an octave lower, so it stays in the general range. Neat. I have a feeling this is a big one that we're getting into. Okay, that's all for Unit 13. On to the next. Remember the 15 major scales we talked about? Well, did you know that for every major key, there's a relative minor key that has the exact same key signature? Unit 14 introduces us to minor scales, and we can find these relative minor scales by beginning on the 6th note of a relative major scale. So C major becomes A minor. Oh, and if you want to find the relative major scale again, go up 3 from the relative minor scale's key note. Bada boom! Following this is the natural, harmonic, and melodic minor scales. The natural minor scale uses only tones from the relative major scale. The harmonic minor scale raises the 7th tone ascending and descending. The melodic minor scale raises the 6th and 7th tones while ascending, but it descends the same as the natural minor scale. This book says that the harmonic minor scale is the one that's used the most often. Remember diatonic intervals? Well, this is them, on the harmonic minor scale. Remember, we've got perfect, major, and minor triads. You get a minor triad with a root, a minor third, and a perfect 5th. You can make your own minor triad by putting a major third on top of a minor third. Vice versa for major. Triads with the root on the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degree of a major scale are also minor triads. Or if you've got a major triad and you take the 3rd and lower it by half a step, you'll get a minor triad. Speaking of changing triads to other triads, here's augmented and diminished triads. You can make an augmented triad by raising the 5th by half a step on a major triad or by adding a major third on a major third. You can make a diminished triad by lowering the 5th half a step from a minor triad, or you can build one by adding a minor third on a minor third. So, with this information, if we build triads off of all the scale degrees of a major scale, we'd have the 1st, 4th, and 5th scale degrees be major triads, the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th be minor triads, and the 7th is diminished. But with that information we've learned, you can create a major, minor, augmented, or diminished triad very easily. Just make sure you understand which one you're starting at. The distance between notes on a major is 3 and 2. Then if you take the 3rd down by half a step, you get a minor, and then you take the 5th down by half a step and you get diminished, or if you go back to major and raise the 5th instead, you get augmented. And this goes back to different scales and so on, and well, it looks like we're starting to get some bigger concepts. It's kind of weirding my brain out how these concepts are beginning to click, you know? There's still some parts I'm not 100% on, but I feel as if the information is there. I just need to keep seeing it and reading it and using it and whatnot, and it'll start making more sense. But that's Unit 14. Remember how we talked about important triads in the major keys? Well, now we've got the primary triads for the minor keys. So, the most important triads of a minor key are from the 1st, 4th, and 5th scale degrees of a minor scale. Also, do you remember how we made the major triad scale? Well, we've also got the harmonic minor triad scale. The 1st and 4th scale degrees are minor triads, 5th and 6th are major triads, 2nd and 7th are diminished, and the 3rd scale degree is augmented. Following that up, remember major chord progressions? Well, now we've got minor chord progressions. And then, like major chord progressions, we move the minor fourth chord to the second inversion, and then 5/V7 to the first inversion. Alright, it seems as if we've got something interesting coming up. That's right, modes. A mode is a scale of 8 notes in alphabetical order. It begins on any scale degree using the key signature of the parent scale. There are 7 modes, and each has got a kick-ass Greek name. We got 3 modes that relate to the major scale, and 4 that relate to the natural minor scale. Starting with the major, we've got Ionian mode, just a major scale. Mixolydian mode, a major scale with the 7th lowered half a step. Lydian mode, a major scale with the 4th raised half a step. Then, the natural minor ones, we've got Aeolian mode, just a natural minor scale. Dorian mode, natural minor scale with the 6th raised half a step. Phrygian mode, a natural minor scale with the 2nd down half a step. And finally, Locrian mode, a natural minor scale with the 2nd and 5th lowered half a step. This one also comes with a statement that says it was not used in ancient times. Okay, figured you should know that, I guess. And yeah, that's Unit 15. This one ends with a word search. At first I was a little confused with these word games, but I understand why at this point. There are just so many dog-gam terms with music theory, it's hard to keep them all in my mind. There's just been multiple points now where I've had to relearn terms I previously wrote about, just because there is so much. But the more these terms are used, the more it'll stick in my brain. I've just got to apply it with music now. But we're not finished yet. Let's get the rest of this information. Harmonizing. A melody in a major key. You harmonize a melody by creating chords to go with it. Remember how 1, 4, and 5/V7 chords have all of the same notes on a major scale? Well, you can mesh mostly any major melodies with these 3 chords. There's a neat little guide for what chord you can use depending on what scale degree the major key is being played in. Next up is broken chords and arpeggiated accompaniments. Broken chords are when you tear a chord apart so that it's no longer played at once. And a side note, before it's broken, it's referred to as a block chord. Neat, when you play the notes of a chord sequentially, it's called an arpeggio. Here are some examples. Passing in neighboring tones. Melodies typically include tones that aren't in the chord used for the harmony. These are called non-harmonic tones. Well, we've got 2 different types here with us today. When a melody goes from one place to another, but with a non-harmonic tone in between, we get the passing tone. When a melody goes to a non-harmonic tone, then returns to where it started, we've got a neighboring tone, which come in a variety of 2. Upper and lower. These tones usually occur on a weak beat and should not factor in your choice of chord to harmonize a melody. Or they can be. I don't know, rules are made up. I don't like it when you tell me what not to do, book. Finishing off this unit, we've got a lesson called Composing a Melody in the Major Key. How fancy. So basically, you can make a melody to an already created chord progression. Here's the 3-step guide. Step 1, analyze the chord progression. Write down the numerals underneath the chords. Step 2, add the chord symbols above the staff. Step 3, use the chord tones and non-harmonic tones to compose your very own melody. Remember that the first and last notes of a melody are typically the root of the first one. On to Unit 17. Harmonizing a melody in a minor key. Similar to a major, but now we've got minor first, minor fourth, and still major V/V7. To compose a melody in a minor key, you do roughly the same things as in a major key. Again, the Roman numerals are lowercase sometimes. 12-bar blues chord progressions. Blues is music that has a deep history with singing from Africa and harmonies from Europe, but that's a conversation for another day. The blues chord progression is 12 measures, and there's many different variants with it. This book keeps it traditional. Well, here's where it gets fun. Now, here's a blues scale. You improvise these with a matching blues chord and you get some sweet sounding beats like oh my heavens, it is glorious. This lesson specifically started to make the pieces click just a little more in my mind. A way to make all of the different sounds work across all the different systems and still making sense of it all. I'll just say the blues gave my brain a little bit of a brain blast. Basically. Anyway, here's the final unit. So we're here, Unit 18, and this unit tells us how to take all of this information and write music. Motive and phrase is the first lesson in this final unit. A motive/motif is a short melodic rhythmic idea used throughout a piece. It's like an idea in a story in the form of music. A phrase is the sentence of music. It can have a complete idea or an incomplete idea, but a phrase is found by the little pauses in between each other to take a breath, a pause, like a sentence. So what do we do with these phrases? Forms. We'll start with AB binary forms. When you combine multiple phrases, you get a complete part, which with another part creates an AB two-part form. So the first section contrasts with the second, but they're going to share similarities but still be distinct to create what we call a song. The AB form has verse and refrain. A verse changes with each repeat, while the refrain is the chorus. It is the chorus, the repeating part of a song. Next up, you got ABA form, which is very similar to AB, but now there's another A to bring the song home. This is what makes up a lot of music. And then, for the final lesson, they talk about rondo form. A rondo form bounces between A and another section. It all comes back to A, basic lay. A, B, A, B, A, A, B, A, C, A, A, B, A, C, A, B, A. There are a lot of other forms though. At least this Wikipedia page full. But that's it. That's where this book ends. That's the essentials. That's the... So that's this book. I've learned a lot of stuff from this, I think. I mean, I know I have. It just feels like, well, how do I show that I've learned something? Maybe I'm not a master of this music theory thing, but I've taken the first step, and now I've just got to take the second and the third, and I understand. It's a mix of methods made for music theory, and now I've got to figure out all this new stuff. It's gonna be difficult, but just one step at a time, and we will create some amazing stuff. Goodbye. You are a weird city, Porcelaite. That's the basics, the fundamentals, the essentials of music theory. If you found an error or something that should have been expanded upon, let me know in the comments. But I was thinking, where should I go from here? There are a few different musical routes I could take, but I don't know. If you got any suggestions for me, let me know. And well, I guess I'll continue onward.